Lak, my man, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Joe. Very good to see
Yeah,
you.
it's been a while.
I think the last time we saw each other in person was in Munich.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a couple
yeah.
years
Well,
ago.
yeah, a couple years ago, you were talking about data engineering, and I don't remember what I was talking about.
I sadly don't remember what you're talking about either. I think it was maybe ML or
I
something
was
like that.
talking about I kind of remember. I was talking about ML ops.
That's right, because it was an ML Ops conference.
Yes,
So
it was an
yeah,
ML ops conference, and I was talking about like how you take machine learning models into production and what
yeah,
are some of the pitfalls and how you ensure that what you're serving is of equivalent quality to what you had when you were training, and how you recognize things like concept drift and data drift.
sure. And that was, I think, March or something like that. And since then, it feels like the world has changed a lot.
100%, 100%, right? I remember using LLMs maybe 7, 8 years ago. I was at Google at the time. We struggled to create the LLM that would generate one line of poetry. So the whole idea was we were training, this was the working with one of the authors of the Transformer paper, actually. And we were looking at taking a model, feeding it one line of poetry, and it was supposed to generate the next line. And of course, we were training the model to do that. I fed it a bunch of poems and said, now we have a poetry generation model. And it kind of sort of worked, but it was really just mixing and matching. It was mixing and matching everything it had seen in its training data set. It was so obvious that it was mixing and matching. But the thing that we did not have then was pre training. We did not have this
Mm,
idea that you could show it a whole bunch of data, and then you could take that model checkpoint that had already been pre-trained, and you could feed it an example, and the model would use that example in its context and do the work. That was the unlock that I think OpenAI brought. That this idea of using a pre-trained model and then being able to provide a little bit of context, and suddenly your models became general purpose engines
hmm.
that you could go ahead and solve a whole bunch of things. And that has been the amazing thing that's happened in the last 3 years.
Yeah,
Is
for
this
sure.
where we were all creating machine learning models for specific tasks, and you were training the model on data that was bespoke to that model. We're suddenly now having models work on just a few examples. And those examples are just in the prompt.
Hmm.
Few shot learning. And few shot learning has been it has been the incredible change that I've seen in the last few years. The thing that
That's
I
a
did
big one.
not expect to see 6, 7 years ago, where every model that we trained was trained. We had transfer learning, but transfer learning worked in very few cases. It worked in image models on deep learning. You would freeze everything until the last layer, and that was great. And now suddenly, image classification became a much easier problem. Instead of requiring millions of images, you could now do image classification with 100 images.
Mm.
That was amazing. But now you do that same thing for pretty much any problem that you want.
It's pretty insane. So back in the day at Google, was that I heard about something called Mina. Was that Mina you were working with, or a different one?
Mina was later. Later. This was
Okay,
even before Mina. This was something called T to T, text to text, I think. Yeah, it was, yeah, text. There's still a GitHub repo out there that
crazy,
has this poetry training model. Just search for my name and look for a poetry model. I think you'll find it somewhere.
crazy. So you had an early glimpse into these systems. Actually, I'm very curious. So you had an early glimpse into these systems even before Mina, which I think was Google's kind of internal chatbot. Chat or GPT comes out even in the playgrounds. And we're not even talking about ChatGPT. Like, what was your sort of opinion about how things were progressing over time through the evolution of ChatGPT when it?
I mean, to me, I think ChatGPT was a very like, product unlock, in the sense of I already said the technology unlock, which is the few shot learning, which was what enabled something like ChatGPT to come in, and you could basically provide a prompt and it would answer it. But just before ChatGPT, the whole way that you would use models was that every model has the very specific data format that you gave it, and it would do the text completion. And you had these very specific end of response token that you would give it, and then it would go complete it, and you would start out the new answer and it would complete that answer. And you had to have these tricks for every model on how you started it and how you would complete it. And what ChatGPT did was that it took all of that, it hid all of that, it made it a very conversational system, and it hallucinated like crazy. It created answers that were off the wall, but it was still incredibly powerful. And the product unlock was, again, we had seen Mina before that, but the product unlock for that was that it was so useful to people. People interacted with it for hours on end. And that genuine usefulness and what would people use such a chatbot for was, I think, the big. It was not a technology unlock, it was a product unlock. And I don't want, that's not meant to be a minimization, because I think product unlocks are harder than technology unlocks.
For sure.
You find so many new things that you can do with technology, but very few of them become product unlocks and that they become useful to people.
It felt like the iPhone moment to me, at least.
Exactly.
Like,
I mean,
very much.
it's not that a touch screen was new. It was not that a mode of. I mean, there were like Nokia phones out there before that did it. I remember going to Georgia Tech. They had this huge monitor that would basically act as a touch screen, and you had the touch screen interface. That was years before the iPhone came out. But this combination of all of that in a small form factor with a gorilla glass on top that made this thing very robust, that had the ability to do so many things that a phone did, but not just being a phone. It was also a pocket PDA, and it was a pocket iPod. It was basically combining so many of those disparate devices into one system. That is what a chatbot did. So many different things that we had to do all collapsed into this one conversational interface that solved a whole bunch of product problems.
Solved a whole bunch, and it took off. Yeah, one of my friends who was on the team that released ChatGPT said they didn't expect anyone they actually didn't expect anyone was going to use it. I remember GPT playgrounds. I forgot about it. Actually, it's like, oh, that thing. Like, okay, you put a search form in front of it. Cool.
Absolutely. OpenAI released it saying, here's this little research thing that we're playing about. I don't think I've talked to a bunch of people. Nobody really expected it to take off the way it did, but it solved that product problem. It solved that user
and the killer thing I thought my friend was saying it too was it was TikTok and college students cheating on their homework and making TikToks was like one of the catalysts. And then obviously you would hear about CEOs, seeing their kids use it, and they would try it, and it's like, holy crap, like this is actually pretty cool. Because the following year, I'm sure you were on the conference circuit too in 2023, and all of a sudden it's like everybody's got a chatbot interface. They all sucked at the time, but it's like, oh, we're doing AI now. So
yeah, I mean, chatbots are, this is the evolution, right? Yes, the conversational interface works, but the conversational interface is not necessarily the final product. The final product needs to incorporate something that makes it more convenient and useful for the user, and so on. But just the fact that you could go build a system that was so general purpose was the thing. And you're right. I think we started the saying, what changed between Munich and now? And there's been so much.
It feels like a lifetime. It's almost like that time doesn't exist, or it was like a weird dream where the pre-generative AI world was, at least the pre-ChatGPT world, like it feels like that was like the 80s or something. Which if you go to Munich, it feels like you could pick any century you're in, and it kind of feels like the same place, really.
Yeah. I mean, again, my life changed. I went from being this person that had struggled to get a poetry model to work. I was pretty skeptical of LLMs. I was looking at the hallucination rates and saying, this is just word completion. It's just a bullshit generator. Sure. So I went from that extreme to quitting my job and starting an agentic company. Right. So went from one extreme to the other company. I'm like completely bought in on now. This is something that is going to change the world, and I want to be part of building this new world. So I think I'm one of those people that went from being a skeptic because I was in the world to then saying, okay, I need to be back in the world because it's changing so much and it's unlocking so much.
I can empathize with that. When they first saw it, I was like, this thing sucks. It's just word, it's just a glorified autocomplete. But now you mentioned an interesting word, agent, now, and so I think that this is sort of the next paradigm of where this is going. And you started an agentic company. You believe enough to quit your job and go all in on this. Walk me through what's happening right now.
So let's kind of think a little bit about what are agents. And agents aren't new, right? The first thing to realize is that agents have been around in computer science for at least 20 years, right? And what's an agent? An agent is essentially a computer program that is sort of autonomous. That you start it off, you give it a goal, and it kind of figures out how it's going to do its job. And in my view, some of the first agents happened in control theory. So you may have heard of like guided missiles, for example. Those are agents because you start a missile off and then you don't know where it's going to go when you launch it. The missile is essentially adapting and changing and basically finding its position. The way it does that is something called a Kalman filter. It basically observes the environment, it takes the error rate, and the error basically feeds into the model. It's just a linear model, it's just a linear matrix. You can write out the math, and that's all it is, but it is agentic because when you launch it, you don't know where it's going to end up. It's not a deterministic result, but every step basically and the what it observes in that step makes it go decide what the next step is. And that's what agentic programs do, right? So it's not just an LLM, right? So normally today, when someone says I'm building an agentic system, it's agentic because of a few reasons. So let's just walk through some of those reasons. Reason number one might be I'm giving an LLM a tool, a function that it can call. And depending on the result of that function, that LLM, the response is going to change, right? So that basically means that it's now producing something that's dynamic. It's changing in response to the environment. It produces some result. It calls a function. That function produces some more responses. That goes in, and the next words that come out of the LLM are different because of what that tool call is. So an LLM plus tool calls, especially if you do it in a loop, now becomes highly agentic because it is responsive. It's responsive to the environment. That's one way that it could be agentic. The other way that it can be agentic is if that tool is not just something that observes the environment, but it's an error, right? It literally, like the way the Kalman filter works, a validation thing. It produces a response. There is some kind of a critique system. It could be a human. It could be something where it could be a compiler, right? The LLM is producing a program. You have a compiler. It compiles it. Here's the error message. Gives it back. And in response to that, the LLM produces the next piece of code. It could be agentic. So you're having all of these. It could be reflection, it could be tool calls, or it could be an agent calling another agent. So in other words, one LLM calling the next LLM, which calls the next. So you break a problem down into subcomponents or sub-agents, and then you get a workflow out of it. And that could be the third way that something is agentic. But regardless, it's this idea that you're building a very dynamic system that's adapting to the environment, which is very unlike a lot of traditional software that is very deterministic in nature.
Or even how we build machine learning models back in the day, where it was just very bespoke, and which still has its place for sure. I mean, it's just
Yeah, the machine, again, you build an agentic system out of a lot of the things that have come before. No, when I say you make a tool call, you want your tool call to work well, right? And that tool call could be a machine learning model. You might basically have an agentic system that is out there trying to figure out if something is fraudulent or not. And in order to do that, it might go form all of the inputs to the machine learning model and call the machine learning model, which then determines if something is fraudulent. But the idea is that earlier you would spend a whole lot of time taking all these disparate inputs and trying to form the inputs to your ML model. You might take discussions about like you might take memo fields in a check, and you want to say, okay, is this memo field in a check, is this relevant for fraud or not? It was a hard thing. You had to take the memo field, you had to embed it, you had to decide if that embedding was going to be an input, and then you had to make sure that your model was trained on all the possible memo fields. Those kinds of things have become much easier.
easy. It's funny. A friend of mine texted me yesterday because she's asking why. I think she saw somebody using an LLM to do a clustering algorithm, and I was like, well, maybe it's calling, just doing k-means behind the scenes, and you don't even know. I don't know, but
It's
yeah,
I don't think it's literally doing k-means,
I
but
don't
it
know
is
how it would.
it is doing something like k-means. Because okay, think about it, right? This is the way I would think about it conceptually. Imagine that you had a word completion thing, okay? And the word completion is the person talking now is X, like blank. And the answer can be either Joe or Lak, right? How does the LLM decide it's Joe or Lak? Okay. You give it in the prompt, you say, here's a few things that Joe said, here's a few things that Lak said. Now the person talking is blank, Joe or Lak, and it's basically using just the thing that came before to decide the completion is Joe or Lak. It is a classification model. And how is it working? It's working because it's finding the things that are common to the kinds of things that Joe says and the kinds of things that Lak says. It is doing, that's essentially what it is. A lot of these things, and that to me is the big unlock, is that so many of these things can be done with a completion.
It is interesting, and it feels like so. Help me with this, right? So it seems like every company now has they moved from the chat box interface that we had a couple years ago to an agentic thing, right? So if I use Notion, for example, I give it some tasks and it'll say, "Well, I'm thinking this through, building something in Notion, or whatever tool I use." Everyone has the agent. It doesn't feel to me like we've hit that, the iPhone use case yet with agents or the ChatGPT moment. What do you think it will take for people to say, aha, like this is what we should actually be doing with agents?
First, we need to forget about agents,
That's good.
which seems to be kind of weird, right? The iPhone moment happens when the technology falls away and
Yeah.
the customer use case comes to the front. And the agents are a means to an end. And if you, as a product designer, can think about what that end is, and you can design it much simpler because there's agents doing the job for you, you won. Right?
Yeah.
It only happens when that age. No, the fact that you say that I go into Notion and there's an agent panel that does the thing for me, that to me is kind of defeating. You want that agent panel to go away, and instead you want it to be I go into Notion and I ask it, right? I start to basically go type like a couple of things, and it recognizes that what I'm doing is that I'm creating a project plan, and it automatically creates a project plan structure for me. It's subsumed, and you kind of assume that it's going to do that. And that's when the agents are now it's being a truly agentic thing, because it's understanding your intent. It's basically doing the right thing based on your intent.
Yeah.
And you want, and again, Notion is a very general use case, and that becomes a much harder thing. What
Hmm.
I'm building is a more of a vertical AI company. And in a
Yeah.
vertical AI sense, we know the domain that we're operating in, and we know the actual problems that we're solving, right? So for example, we're working in private credit, and we may be doing something called risk monitoring, right? So the lender basically has issued a loan, and then they're getting payments back, they're getting notices back, right? And the notices might be about, okay, this company basically has sold this asset. Fine, it sold this asset. Oh my God, they've sold this asset. This is the one that collateralized for the loan, and we have a problem here. What should an agent do? Well, we could go build an agent panel that goes and basically provides like Q&A, all of that. Or we could have an agent proactively monitor the notice feed and tell the user, I saw an asset sale that came by, and the asset sale is associated with this deal. And in this deal's credit agreement, it says that this loan was securitized on that asset. Do you want to go take a look? That to me is an autonomous agent doing its job. And that's where we need to be.
Yeah. And so back up a bit. So when you say a vertical AI, what it mean?
What is what? So it's again a term of art, right? You have
Yeah, of course.
horizontal AI, which is AI that works across a bunch of different industries. So when you think about Gemini, you think about ChatGPT, those are horizontal AI. You think about Notebook LM, it's a horizontal AI, right? You think about tools that are meant to be used in across a bunch of industries. You take Perplexity, you think Notion. Those are all horizontal AI because they're meant to be work across industries. But then you have players. You have a Harvey, for example, that says, I'm going to work in the legal domain. And now when they're working in the legal domain, they can go deeper into legal domain. They can think about legal jargon. They can think about legal use cases. and they can go solve those legal use cases. They can say, I want to find anytime a client attorney privilege happens, and automatically go ahead and take all the documents that are privileged and tag these things privileged without you having to do anything about it. To me, at least, maybe I'm biased, it's a lot simpler to think about agentic use cases when you immediately think, what are the concerns and problems that we can solve autonomously in a vertical domain? Much harder in horizontal domains. So horizontal domains, like your agents are, you see agent panels, you see things that agents are doing. But then as soon as you go into a vertical domain, it becomes much cleaner, where you can say, here's like I said in my risk monitoring, we're sitting on top of a notice feed and we're finding like assets that are getting sold that shouldn't be getting sold. That's a much easier thing for us to do. But we can go build those agents. They can be autonomous. They can provide incredible value to everyone that's working on it, right? So we can do this for, like, I talked about risk monitoring, but we do this across a private credit thing. We do it for origination, we do it for due diligence, we do it for screening, we do it for monitoring, we do this for loan reviews, we do this for loan payouts, we do this for everything that happens in that realm. We know all of the areas in which an agent can dramatically unlock a lot of productivity. And that's and I think that if all the people listening to your podcast, if you are an employee, you're working at a company, your company is, assuming it's a non-tech company, right? I'm not talking to people who are working at Google and
Right.
Amazon, but let's say maybe you're working at Amazon, you're working in Amazon retail. It's a lot easier for you to think about, where would an AI agent help in retail, right? Maybe it helps your sellers list their items faster, right? So you have agents that take a particular item and basically prepares it for sale. Maybe you have an agent that helps a seller improve the sales of their items, right? But then it all comes down to going ahead and finding ways in which you can have autonomous programs that can reason through the data that you have and build something much better.
Yeah, and so with vertical AI, then, I mean, so if you take finance, for example, right, or the vertical, like how thinly sliced are you trying to get an agent? So you mentioned lending, for example. There's obviously like a myriad verticals within the finance vertical
Right.
and
Yeah.
myriad verticals
Hedge
within those
funds, you
sub
have private
verticals.
credit, you have PE, you have public markets, you have all of this. But I think that the deeper you go into a specific vertical, the easier it becomes for you to identify truly customer oriented use cases,
Hmm.
things that help people get their job done, right?
Sure.
Things that they're not doing today because it is not scalable. That's where AI really shines. I mean, I do not get excited when someone says, I used an AI and it saved me 30% of time. Like, who cares? Right. But if you tell me that I used an AI and I was able to do 300 things that I never even had time to look at before, now I'm excited. Right. AI should be an enabler where it helps you go solve problems that you just did not have the scale to do before. And now you have this tool that is cheap, that you can run, and that's important, right? You should be able to think about it as the ROI is there for me to go run this model, spend these tokens to get this result, and that result is so useful and important that it's worth me spending those tokens.
How do you show that art of the possible to prospects and customers? Because I think the notion right now is often, and this is what you hear, the talking people are hearing in the news, is like, well, we're gonna save money, we're gonna cut, we're gonna increase worker productivity. It's all these
You're going to
incremental
cut people. I
gains.
know you are going to say that, Joe. Let's be honest about it, right? People say, "Oh, we're going to basically improve productivity. We're going to cut 30% of workforce. We're going to cut 40% of our workforce." It's like, look, number one, um, it's very, very, very rare that can actually happen. Most people's jobs involve many things, even like take programming, right? I think we've all at this point used coding assistants, and we've all found that they're incredibly good and they improve our personal productivity. But then when you go and actually look at the life of a project, the life of the project, how much savings actually happen because of a coding assistant is not very high. because the job of a programmer is not to program. The job of a programmer is to understand the user requirements, understand the systems that need to operate in, and build something that solves that problem. Coding is a means to an end, and if that means gets done faster, it means hopefully, right? This is not always the case with all the AI slop out there, but hopefully it means that you're building better quality software, right? And you're basically solving more problems, you're solving more edge cases, and you're building more dashboards and more tools because those got easier. But it doesn't mean like the amount of software you build is not a limited resource. Like it's not like a finite, like it's not a finite amount. If you get more hours in the day to do stuff, you will build more stuff. It is not that you're gonna, no, it's not a finite. The pie is not limited at all. If you can do more, it's not about cutting 30%. It's about doing more things.
Yeah, and growing 300%, I think, is a good way of framing it too. Because
Exactly.
it feels like the discussions really are like kind of playing not to lose versus let's play to win a different type of
The
game too.
discussions are a lot about let's take this thing that we're already doing today and let's do it a little bit more efficiently, let's do it a little bit more faster. But that's all assuming that the things that you do today are the only things worth doing. And I hope that's not the case.
Yeah.
Every business that we've been into, every customer we've talked to, the question is, what would you do if you had 10 times as many employees as you have?
Mm,
What would you be doing that you don't do today? And that immediately opens up like, oh my God, I would actually go do X, Y, and Z. I just can't, I don't have the bandwidth to do that. And then we say, okay, now let's figure out.
interesting. So is that how you lead the discussions on what to build or help them? Okay,
Yes, yes,
got
that's
it.
the, we try to basically reframe these discussions with all of our customers, all of our partners, and to say, okay, yes, maybe you're thinking efficiency now, but just step back a bit. And let's say you're a 1,000-person company today. What if you're a 10,000-person company? What would you do with 10,000?
I mean, that's what it's weird though because people don't operate in a
That
logarithmic
abundance
scale,
mindset,
right? So it's what's that?
an abundance mindset.
Well, yeah, because you're not just saying like, what would you do if it was like double? It's like I don't know. Let's add another zero onto it, right? So like logarithmically, it's like okay, or 100 times more people. Like it's just how often do you find that people's brains sort of break in that thought exercise? Because I think for me it'd be hard to answer that. I don't know. Maybe I could, but
Yeah,
it's a
let's try that, Joe.
yeah.
Okay, let's assume that rather than doing one podcast, right, you were able to do 10. What would you do?
I actually ask myself this every day, right? Like, how can I use AI to leverage what I'm doing right now? And it feels like so. Here's where, and I think I have a lot of ideas on this. I'm not going to say on the podcast my strategy, but where because I think I'm in the tooling so much, and I'm like, okay, I want to build these things, but it feels the thing where I feel because I'm in content a lot more these days in media and education. So I think the crux for me is understanding where can I inject a sense of, genuine, Joe, so to speak,
Right.
versus creating AI slop, which I don't want to do,
So,
right?
so,
So
so I take that back. So the
yeah,
answer is not 10 times as many podcasts, but
yeah,
what would you do if you had 10 times as many Joes
yeah,
on this one
exactly.
podcast? What are the quality things that you're not doing today that you would be able to do?
That's just it. So yeah, it's about multiplying myself. And yeah, that comes down to just scaling. You know what I mean? It's just everything,
The
right? So
quality, right? Maybe
quality.
today you spend an hour editing and you say, I can use AI to really, really remove all the ums and ahs, make the thing much more polished, add a lot more visuals to all my podcasts, make things more interactive, right? Produce more short form TikTok videos out of my podcast. There's a whole bunch of things that you might be able to do that you don't do today because you don't have the time, but you would be able to do because you have AI that's able to take that one podcast that you have and make it much higher quality, but produce it in many more content formats.
It's an interesting one too. So I use AI a lot for basically a co-founder. right? So I'm sure you do too. It's like, how would I approach this problem? What are the top things I should be automating in my company right now, given what you know about it? And it's been fantastic. Like, it's been good for brainstorming
It's a
and
great idea generator. It's a
yeah,
great idea generator because it's seen all the ideas out there on the internet
yeah.
and
It's
it's
just like, well,
mixing and
that's nice.
matching.
Let's try that. So how, I guess, to bring it back to what you're doing with vertical AI and these discussions, when how often do you find that your customers or the executives are actually using AI in that strategic capacity to say how do I grow my business? How do I 10x, 100x what we're doing? Are they there yet?
Increasingly, yes. Almost everybody that we talk to has been using AI as a thought partner. How often they use it varies, but have they used it? Absolutely.
Hmm.
And almost every white collar worker that we talk to now, executives all the way down to executive assistants and secretaries and the new associates and principals and everybody has been using AI as a thought partner, has been using AI to rewrite, has been using AI to reformat things. Those are table stakes.
Yeah,
If no, I would never build a company that is basically around these what I call horizontal things. These are things that pretty much every model does out of the box, and
hmm,
you don't want to be in that space, right? But when you think about things that need to be done reliably, robustly, routinely, that's where the vertical AI companies like a company like ours needs to be focused on, and
yeah.
that's what we need to be building.
That's interesting. So, kind of backing up a bit, like you were a VC for a bit, right? After you
I was in
left
private
Google,
equity,
yeah,
yeah.
private equity. Okay, never mind. Sorry to disparage you. But I mean, he had a lot of access, I'm guessing, to deals and sort of a visibility on the market. What was it about vertical AI that attracted you?
Funnily enough, it was not the fact that had a visibility into market. It was a leap of faith, right?
Interesting.
I decided with the pace at which things were moving that I could not afford to sit on the sidelines of a technology wave, right? If you're a technologist, if you're an engineer, and there's a technology wave going on, you need to be building. You absolutely need to be building, and that's what I decided. Right now, it was a very cushy job. It was fun, a lot of impact, but I was not the one building.
Right.
Instead, our portfolio companies are the ones building, and I was advising them. Right, I was helping hire the teams. I was saying, "This is the project you could be doing." Providing advice to the board, but it was all advisory. It
Yeah.
was not building. Genuinely, in a space where things are moving so much, there's only so much that you can do by observing. You need to be building, right? And I was a builder, right? And then like now I started my career as a researcher, did research, then became like leaders, and leaders don't actually do building anymore. We have teams that do stuff, and but I had enough of my prior experience inform everything that my teams were building. I was able to understand it. And then I moved into the PE role, like with our portfolio companies and so on. And it became even more removed. And
Mm,
I said, okay, in this technology wave, like I need to be back building. So that was my decision. My decision was that I need to be building. And then once I left, and then I had to basically decide how was I going to build? And I have an article out there that basically I wrote it just when I had left the PE firm, right? Of here's the technology wave that's happening. What are my options? How am I thinking about it? And at the time, I don't know, I was, long story short, finally I decided that what I wanted to do was to co-found a company, teamed up with an old colleague of mine, and here we are, right? But it was much more about an antsiness about I need to be back in, I need to develop my skills again from scratch, right? Build again, and solve the problems on a day-to-day basis, and that was the reason why I I'm doing what I'm doing.
that's so cool. I mean, I could definitely empathize with that. It feels like there's a lot happening, I think, to put it lightly. And yeah, you're absolutely right. If you are on the sidelines and you're just sort of sitting there coaching other people, it's sort of like you're coaching a game where you probably don't even know how the game is played
No,
right
again,
now.
you are a good coach because you were a player once. That was
Yeah.
that was that was me. but the game changed. And then, like, how good of a coach am I, right? And I needed to get back in the game. And that's essentially, that's a great metaphor, Joe. That's a great
It takes a
metaphor.
lot of self-awareness though to do that.
But
It's,
yeah.
I,
and,
well, I mean, most people in a leadership position
and
or
a little bit
advisor.
of foolhardiness, I think.
Well, yeah, but you got to do that to start a business. I mean, you got to be kind of an idiot to start a business, to be frank. It's
Oh,
just, it's
100%.
hard.
95% of startups fail.
Yeah.
So yes, you have to be a little reckless and a little foolhardy to do it. But ultimately, the game changes, and if you want to keep, no, you want you no, you want to be in the game.
That's interesting. Well, because I mean, the temptation, though, I would say it with somebody at your tenure and position would be stick it out, just write it out and off into whatever sunset you happen to be writing off into, right? And just be like, that's for the young folk. That's for this generation doing that. I'm here. I know everything because obviously I work in PE. Oh, I'm kidding. But I think that's what a lot of people would tell themselves. We're good, right? But I think it's pretty awesome. You had that insight and kind of ballsiness to go and just like say, well, we'll go on to the next thing, I suppose.
I mean, that is true, and I think the other way to think about it is that I think that I have another 20 years left in me, right?
Yeah.
And so, in that sense, I'm not ready to go right into the sunset yet. And given that I have another 20 years left, right? At least I hope, right? What do I need to do to prepare myself for the next 20? And
Yeah.
so that's the way I'm thinking.
So, which is interesting right now because it feels like at the rate of change that's happening, you're sort of on that. There's always been this notion of the exponential curve. I mean, popularized by Ray Kurzweil back in the day. Like, actually, I'm looking at some of his books I had from like the, I think actually it's just kind of funny. But now it's the curve fitting exercise is actually holding relatively well, which means over time we're going to see shorter and shorter, growth, more periods of growth in shorter amounts of time. Like, what do you think is after this phase of where we are now? Because this isn't the fine. I think we're just the beginning of something else entirely. Like, what do you think that
I,
is?
no, yeah, I guess when you think about it, like first it was basically language models, right? And then it was like tool calling and agents, and now it's about thinking models and basically better reasoning. Where I'm seeing things happen at least in our corner of the world, in the things that we're building, we're finding ourselves doing dynamic prompting, right? The prompts themselves were basically becoming more dynamic in that they're being generated, right? And they're being
Interesting.
generated in response to the environment, in response to the type of situation that we're in. And so there's this very old saying in computer science. I'm sure you've heard it, Joe, right? The solution to every problem in computer science is one more level of indirection. The more things change, the more they remain the same. So when I talk about dynamic prompting, it's just one more level of indirection.
And so, if you zoom out, like, what does this mean? Like, because you're talking about dynamic prompting, and it's sort of this natural extension of this to me is that agents or whatever they end up becoming. I don't know. That's just one way we describe autonomous things that perceive and interact with environments. But like, if the dynamic prompting would sort of suggest this meta thing where agents are off doing their own things. At some point, where are humans even involved in this loop at all?
Humans are the orchestrators. Humans are the ones that decide what happens. We are the ones who have the intent. The agents are the things that we lob off to go do things for us. But we're the ones who decide what things need to be done.
Mm-hmm.
It's fundamentally that's why I said agents have arrived. When agents go away and you see the user experience, you see the customer product, that's when agents are successful, when you don't think about agents anymore. And that
Yeah.
is a fundamentally a human-centered view of it.
Yeah, it's something I struggle with a lot too. I guess as these agents get better, do they? I'm not going to get into some AGI argument because I think that's a bit speculative and stuff, and I think it's a different rabbit hole or wormhole. But I suppose when you start looking at some of the studies on alignment and so forth that's happening in misalignment, like how this maybe goes back to sort of the touch on areas of governance and security and so forth. But how do we know the agents are going to act in our best interests?
Right. That's a very good point, right? how do you know your agents are going to act in your best interests? It's, I think, the whole that there's this very famous problem about paper pins, right? Now, you tell an agent to go produce as many agent pins as you have, and after a while, it takes over the world because it's just producing agent pins. So, what matters in many cases is what you tell the agents to do and the guardrails that you put them in, right? Because you will make mistakes in kind of instructing those agents and endowing them with powers and endowing them with instructions and some of those. So really the guardrails are around the inadequacy of being able to tell any agent that is autonomous exactly what to do. Like as humans, we all have inbuilt guardrails, right? Where the human has a moral imperative where like no matter what I tell you, whatever, like you're not going to go out and kill somebody, right? Because that's a moral imperative that you have. An agent has no such moral imperative. There's no such thing that it can ever do, right? And so we have to basically make sure that they run in a sandbox of some kind where their capacity to harm is limited by external factors external to the agent. So you have this whole idea of like constitutional AI where you provided a constitution and the agent has to follow it. The problem is it's all breakable. It's every one of those things is breakable, so it has to be external to the agent.
Yeah. Because I was reading some stats the other day, and it was like 41% of companies this year intend to, whatever companies were surveyed, intend to implement agents, whatever those happen to be, and then up from 5% in 2025. Meanwhile, what was it? 7% of companies had some sort of AI governance on hand or something. So the disparity was interesting because I'm like, okay, this is going to be fun to watch. You don't have really any security safeguards, no governance, and you're going to do this.
Yeah. So again, I cannot emphasize this enough. Run your agents within a sandbox, and the sandbox basically is the kinds of things that it's allowed to do and the kinds of things that no matter what it tries to do, it never gets to be able to do it because it doesn't have the permissions to do those things. Right. And it has to be external to the agent. You cannot go prompt an agent and say, you should not delete my database. Sorry, that doesn't work. You need to basically make sure that the agent cannot delete the database. Right. There's no way that it can call a tool that deletes the database. Right. If that's no, so you have to have them running in that environment that is constrained in some.
So when we're talking about vertical AI, for example, then are those safeguards going to be baked in? Like finance, right? Heavily regulated, myriad regulations, again, depending what vertical you're in, and macro regulations and so forth. Like how do you bake all those safeguards in to make sure the agent isn't like running afoul?
It's no different from any other software that we've ever built. Like you build a service, you build a SaaS service, you put it inside a VPC, right? You basically say there's no data exfiltrated from it.
Right.
Why is an agent any different? An agent is deployed like any other software.
Do you give it like the regulations then, I suppose, like kind of like a rag or something like here's rules, have nice or
I really believe that your guardrails need to be independent of the agent, right? Okay. And so you treat an agent like any other software and you basically put it in a permissioned environment and so on. Like this, I mean, it sounds good to say that, oh, we take a regulatory manual and we drop it and say the LLM has to follow it.
Right.
No.
What would be some anti-patterns then in terms of implementing agents? Say I'm a company. I'm one of the 41% of companies that are going to be implementing agents this year. I have no idea what I'm doing. Right. But I've heard from my CEO friends that this is a great idea, so let's do it. Where would I screw things up the most?
Number one, giving the agent access to tools that are way more capable than you really want them to be able to do. That, I think, is the number one problem that I see. But you talk to people, they're always worried about toxicity and they're worried about the agent producing responses that run amok. But for the most part, these agents are used by internal staff and internal teams. And so that risk is a bit lower because it's not actually going out to the public. It is only going out to internal staff who prompted it in the first place in some sense, maybe, right? So in terms of my hierarchy, the number one thing I would watch out for is over-capable tool calls.
Okay, I got that. And then what else should I consider?
What else should you consider? The next thing is branding, toxicity, in some ways like creating an unsafe workplace.
Yeah.
That could be a problem, especially you have an internal team that's creating something, and then the responses that provide end up creating an unsafe workplace for whatever reason. That's the second one. The third one is inherently biased outputs, right? Because ultimately, all of these things are going to go based on the examples, the exemplars, the few shot learning, the way the models are trained, the way they're evaluated. Your evaluation functions could be biased. You could be evaluating very much on a small subset of the kinds of customers that you serve. And then your model gets optimized to that slice of customers. And all of a sudden, you're maybe not realizing it, you're discriminating against a whole bunch of others, right? In an unlawful way. So you might find yourself, because of the way that you're training these models, that you find yourself on the wrong side of the law, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be very, very, very careful in terms of how you evaluate these models, because as you evaluate them, you're putting them into a feedback loop where it's constantly improving, and over time this model basically becomes very biased because you're evaluating again in a very biased way.
Mm-hmm. Kind of zooming out and closing out, like, what are you excited about over the next, I don't know, 2, 3 years?
I'm excited about your book.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited about your book actually too. We'll talk books actually. We're also authors.
Right.
So your book actually came out first, so we can talk about whatever the hell I'm doing.
Very good.
Generative AI Design Patterns, Solutions to Common Challenges when Building Gen AI Agents and Applications, out on O'Reilly. You also wrote a book, by the way. I guess that happened. Tell me about it.
All right. So Gen AI design patterns. Again, having been in this realm of we're building these AI applications, and a lot of things that we find are common problems. Like, how do you control the style of an LLM? How do you ensure that the format of the data structures that the LLM creates is in a way that downstream applications don't have to do too much JSON parsing? How do you like some of the questions that you asked? How do we ensure that the LLMs operate in a guardrailed way? How do we ensure that we have external capabilities that we're able to invoke in a consistent manner? How do we ensure that we are picking the right piece of, how do we curate the context, right? So all of these are common problems. And so what we do in the book is like 32 of these common solutions to these problems that occur when you're building Gen AI applications. If I can say that, I'm very, very, very proud of the book. Really encourage your readers to go buy it, read it, talk about it. I'm very interested to hear what you think. If you found it useful as you build your applications, would love to know.
And before we get to talking about my book too, like, what if so you wrote this book while you were building a company?
No, I wrote this book before I left to join.
Okay, it's like, Jesus. How much of the book writing process went into your thinking about sort of the company that you wanted to do? Did it help you at all?
It helped me a lot because, again, as I said, like, I was working with a bunch of teams that were building these AI models across our portfolio, right? And I still have a lot of contacts within big tech, and I was talking to a lot of my friends and colleagues at a variety of these labs, Anthropic and DeepMind and so on, that were building these things. And so this is a synthesis of a lot of my conversations with people that I know, and the experiences of our teams as they were building, and the kind of problems that we were encountering, and me saying, okay, like, hey, I know you guys built this. How did you go solve it? And they would tell me how they solved it. I would basically say, okay, let's go try this out. And so that was basically this. That was the synthesis of the book, was this process of, as we were building over the last year and a half, like, all of the things that we were learning and the problems that we were encountering and how we were solving them. That's what gave the book. Not just me. That was Hannes is my co-author. He was the principal engineer at Digits. Like, they build software for accounting. So again, they had been building a lot of these AI agents and so on. So the problems that they were encountering and how they had solved them. This is our combined experience of a bunch of experts that we meaning the two of us plus all of our network of folks that are building in this space, what we're discovering. That's what went into the book. But in the process of writing the book is when I was realizing, hey, I'm sitting on the sidelines here.
Yeah, it does that to you, doesn't it? Because you're like, I'm writing about it. I mean, and it's kind of cool though, because you are helping, I think, clarify your thinking around the topic too. Like I said, there's no better way to think about a topic than to write about it. And writing a book is really fucking hard. Congrats, by the way, for getting through that.
Thank you so much. And again, I'm super excited about the topic of your book, data models. And
Yeah, well, it's interesting, and it fits into what we're talking about too. So the goal of what I've been talking about, this book, it's called Mixed Model Arts, and so kind of plays into my background in combat sports and data and all the other stuff. But the notion really is, if you remember, like back in the 80s, especially, I think we both lived in the 80s.
yeah, the Inman era.
Yeah, but it was also, in combat sports, right? It was always this question of like, okay, would Mike Tyson beat Bruce Lee or some stupid question like that, right? Or like, would Hulk Hogan beat Bruce Lee or whatever?
Would you rather have 1,000 ducks or one big duck? Would you fight 1,000 ducks or would you
Oh
fight
yeah, yeah.
one big?
Questions like that, right? And so it was sort of this question of like one style versus another, and it was like, and then UFC comes around. I think it was 1992, I believe, UFC one, and there were obviously in Brazil there were these events called Vale Tudo, which were these no holds barred events where it's like anything goes, you can just beat the shit out of each other, no gloves, have fun. Use whatever style you want. And so, but what I realized was, and the Inman and Kimball wars, I think definitely exemplified this. Where it's like the battles of basically two sort of orthogonal but similar approaches when we're talking about analytical data modeling, and then you step out and you're like, but we tend to ignore all the other things around us. We have applications and operational modeling, and then we have ML, then we have now LLMs and all these, and it's sort of this fusion of what happened in mixed martial arts with the UFC. If you were to take a fighter from today's UFC and put him back in time, I mean, he would absolutely decimate anybody he came across, right? I used to train with UFC champions back in the 2000s, and I was like, these guys are good. The ones today would kick those guys' ass in like 2 seconds, not even a question. And so it's just interesting seeing how the world of data has evolved. The world of how we use data, how we think about it, right? You have streaming, big data systems back in the day, bigger data systems now that also use small data, right? But all these, and what I'm seeing is it's really a convergence of all these different styles because the use cases are compressing, right? So even a couple of years ago, when you were to mention AI or machine learning to a software engineer, they would sort of look at you like, unless you're at a big tech company where they're doing that stuff. In most companies, I'd say, yeah, I don't even care about that at all. You mention AI to a software engineer today, and they're like, yeah, I love AI. It's great. And they converse it in things like tokens and,
Yeah, but where does the data fit in, right? Because if I'm all I'm doing is prompting a model, where is the data? And you say, oh, well, there's RAG. But step back a bit. Where is the data, right, that an AI model needs? And you can kind of classify it in a few ways. You can think of it as like data that we never actually cared about before because it was only humans consuming it. PowerPoint files, PDFs, unstructured text, emails. This is all data, but this was never part of our planning when you're planning a data warehouse or you're planning a data lake. How many people have data lakes that were built 5 years ago that stored even a single PDF in it?
right.
It was
That's
just never part of the conversation.
it wasn't.
It was
And
not.
that's the whole point of the book too. Is it's about like the convergence of use cases of different types of data. Even Bill Inman, for example, right? When he came up with the data warehouse, he was telling me like he promptly forgot about it and moved on. Because he's like, we're talking about the 10% of data back in the day, 90s or 2000s, which is like structured data. And he's thought, well, but all this text data that we have and stuff like PDFs, PowerPoints, whatever, like we're not capitalizing on that. What are we doing about that? So we work to obviously parse that out. But now obviously the world's changed and we have, these magnificent machines that can synthesize all this different data. So it's like, so the notion is, I think humans are still going to work with data. We're going to, but we also need to be cognizant that we have other ways of working with things. And so I think but the problem is right now, unless we have, I think that the foundations of thinking and working with data, we're not going to be as effective as we could if we're just blindly relying on either misinformed hearsay about how certain techniques work or blindly just trusting LLMs to do everything. Because I think we're at a critical juncture where if you don't understand how data should be modeled, for example, like we're completely fucked. In fact, I could say that we have been for a bit. Like we regressed as an industry backwards, actually.
Right.
And you can see this.
Yeah, where people are just throwing it. there was this whole idea, like the reason data lakes got a really bad name was people are just throwing everything in the kitchen sink into it with no organization whatsoever. And then people learned and then said, okay, now we need to basically make sure there's a data catalog, that we understand how we're organizing the data, even if it's unstructured. We have enough metadata about it that allows us to reason through and find the right piece of information that solves a particular problem. And then you had your data warehouse and you have your data transactional databases. And we understood the difference between a transactional database, which is constantly updated, and a data warehouse that is a complete record of everything. And then you understood what you needed for machine learning training, which was a data warehouse, and what you needed for machine learning inference, which was a transactional database. We built up that whole tribal knowledge. We built up, this is how we do it, this is how we model the data in a way that it can move from being used in a dashboard for analytics, being used in descriptive things, being able to use in predictive things, and how you build a data model for that. And now suddenly we're in this new world where, in addition to humans using the data with dashboards, in addition to software using the data with machine learning models, you now have AI agents using the data autonomously to answer arbitrary questions and to take arbitrary actions if necessary.
Absolutely.
And now the way you need to design your data model now needs to support all three of these use cases.
Yeah.
Not just the first two, but also the third.
Oh, yeah. And I'm guessing, I was writing about this the other day, actually, because I'm finishing a chapter on modeling processes, domains, something you're probably acutely aware of. And the final section, which I published an excerpt yesterday, was actually, I think we have to be willing to live in a world where. So I wrote about how AlphaGo back in the day, you were at Google at the time, I believe. When that came out, the Go players, I think the word alien was tossed around a lot. Like, I felt like I was playing against an alien in some ways.
Yeah, it made a move that I never anticipated anybody would make, because it had learned through self-play. It had learned by playing against itself. So it was completely different. Mm-hmm. So I play this game called Bridge, which is a card game, hugely into it. And I play against, one of the ways that I train. And there's this program called Into Bridge that I play. And the robot there is a neural network. Right? It's not a rules engine, it's a neural network. And every once in a while, it does something that seems weird, but now I've learned to say, okay, why is this statistically a valid thing to do? Right? I start to think about, why is that a statistically valid thing to do? And that's usually very eye-opening to me, to understand that here's this machine that thinks in a very different way.
Well, yeah. And so I think, it's one of those things where we have to be prepared for a world where, not now, probably in a couple of years, but I think AI is going to develop its own sort of formats, models that we can't even comprehend, that in the way it talks to itself. And I think that's the fourth or fifth layer on top of that is
if you're in finance, you've been living in that world for the last 10 years. Right? Sure. You've had automated trading bots, and you know that, the game of these sub-second trading, it's all completely automated, right? There's no human playing in that. Like, humans are much more playing in the longer term stuff.
Yeah, like Buffett, who's also a bridge player. Yeah. It's an interesting world we're in now, and so I think but the goal of the book really is to bridge sort of the old and the new, because I feel like also along the way, practitioners just like seemingly forgot about everything. They're like, well, even relational databases, right? Like the whole thing is like, maybe try and at least think about normalization. The number of people you meet who can describe normalization, normal forms, is like really, really small these days.
And the unfortunate thing is that you need both. You need the normalized data to support your transactional database, but you also need the flattened data to support your ML models and your, the ones that,
Sure.
And you need high quality exemplars to support your AI use cases.
Oh, yeah. But I'm talking about normalization just in the sense where the sense of, how do I make sure my data isn't redundant?
Right.
How do I make sure I don't have
no, that's what I meant.
Anomalies. But it's even that practice is like, I don't know what that is. Like, I'll just fucking build one big table and call it a day. So I think it's just, so that's the goal of it really, is to bring everyone, I think, into the present and the future of it. So the first book is obviously like foundations. I don't even talk about any approach. I'm just like, how do you think about time? Time's interesting. There's a lot of ways to think about time. no matter if it's agents or humans doing it, time is just this thing. So it's a building blocks, and then there's a second one because the book's like 700 pages now, so you can't do it in one.
Nice. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm on your email list, so I get the chapters as you write them.
Oh, Jesus, I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, it's weird writing in public like this, but I feel like I'm also testing out like what's next for a book, right? Like if you're gonna be, so I feel like
Yeah, I mean the sad part, again, we're both authors here. The sad part about a book sometimes is it's obsolete the moment it hits the ground.
that's
But there's the other thing. I learn a lot from books because unlike a blog post, unlike a tweet, unlike a single LinkedIn post, there is a lot you get led to it, right? In the sense of you get the foundations, and so you learn to think, and you learn in stages and steps because somebody has gone through the trouble of curating it in a way that is meaningful and understandable.
oh yeah.
So it's to me, a book is the best way to learn.
Oh yeah, like I'm just looking at a book on my desk. I don't know. I was just rereading Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Law, which is like, even I was looking through this. It was written like 20 plus years ago, and I'm like, yeah, that still
Yeah,
holds. It's like
maybe
some
the examples are old,
yeah,
but the principles are still relevant.
principles. If you read like Dale Carnegie's How to Influence and Influence People, the examples are like highly racist, misogynist, whatever. But the principles still hold. Like, be a good person. Don't criticize. Don't just
Remember people's names.
remember your name, Lak. But yeah, it's a good book. But I got to get going. I actually gotta go pick up my kid. But it's
All
great
right.
talking to you, Lak. And best of luck with
Mike,
everything.
oh,
Yeah,
thank you so much. Thank you. We will need it. Appreciate it. And it's great talking to you, Joe.
yeah. Likewise, man. Take care. See ya.
Thanks.